Welcome to the Poultry Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Mulnix. And on today's episode, it couldn't be more timely. With egg prices at an all-time low and farmers having to make tough decisions, we're going to talk today with an expert when it comes to feed additives, and we're going to get right to the bottom of how we can help you today as farmers navigate this market, especially as it comes to your feed and your costs, things like that. So with me today, I have Curtis Novak, PhD, which I believe is probably the highest level of education I've had on the podcast so far. And so I'm excited. He's the director of poultry at Alltech in Ridley, where he leads the company's North America poultry nutrition and feed additive division. He holds a PhD in animal nutrition from the University of Nebraska and spent 16 years at Purina as a technical service nutritionist and division manager before joining Alltech in 2023. Curtis brings both the bench science and the field experience. He worked with commercial layer, broiler, and turkey operations across the country and has a particular focus on gut health, organic mineral nutrition, and practical feed cost management. Whew, what a bio. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it.
So Curtis, tell me about yourself that was not in the bio, like where you fit into this industry.
Sure. Well, I actually was born in Nebraska, so I'm a Husker at heart. But actually, my journey is not exactly like a lot of people in the poultry industry. I started off with cattle and hogs and row crop back in the day. So that was kind of my base. And so when I went to school, the thoughts was to originally go to veterinary school. And that's for my time teaching at Virginia Tech. That was kind of it was 80% of the people coming into the department back then was pre-vet. So that didn't really work out like I thought it would. So I went into the journey of nutrition, and originally was going to swine nutrition because I knew the industry. We raised farrow to finish hogs back when I was a kid. And I thought, well, that would make sense because I already know how to raise them. I managed birds or I managed hogs before. That would be the thing to do. Well, come to find out it's not as easy just to run into those situations at different universities. And I got accepted into the programs, but they didn't have any assistantship, no money to go. And it just so happened that Nebraska, my major professor, Dr. Sheila Scheidler, had assistantship. And I said, okay, I guess I'm going to do poultry. That's where it all started. Not the normal process into birds, never raised any birds before outside the typical family processing things we had back in the 70s and 80s, and got into that and really never looked back. Did my master's PhD both in Nebraska, and then my first job was at Virginia Tech University. So I was on the faculty there for 7 years doing research extension teaching. Thought that was the way to go back in the day. I knew a lot of people. I was able to start up a good research program, applied research program to help support the industry, and found out that I didn't really like that setup as much as I probably thought I would have. So went into Purina, and that's where I reside today in the industry, and I love doing it. Part of my why. Everybody always asks people, "What's their why? What are you doing? What you're doing?" And it really, when I think back on it, I think I'm not doing a row crop or raising hogs like I used to, but I am supporting an industry that's still agriculturally based. And if I can give back to that and support them and help them be successful, that's what I try to do. That's what keeps me driving every day. So that's kind of different things that probably you didn't have in your bio. That's part of my life and my journey.
Well, with 16 years at Purina and this Virginia Tech academia, I mean, what did both of those chapters teach you as a result or around nutritional science?
I think that the basic nutrition, I learned a lot from the university side of things, just better understanding those core nutrients and how they work together and what's really required, especially when you start working with the industry on an extension basis. You learn a lot of pieces of that. I probably didn't understand the economics as well as I did until I got into the actual industry and seeing, okay, well, if I make a change here on, if I increase my cost of feed per ton by $5, that's probably half a cent per dozen that it costs. I didn't understand those relationships back when I was at the university. When you're doing research, you're very focused. You're very focused on a topic and you're trying to provide impact back to those customers and that extension group that you work with, but you're not looking at the system as a whole. When you get into the industry, now you gotta start looking at the economics of everything, and that's just not the feed, which is 70% of the cost of this, but also all the other pieces of it that can have impact on that cost per dozen and that cost per pound of meat that goes out the door, which is really important now. The economic side is probably the difference that that I learned when I left the university and went into the industry was, now it's all economics. Let's try to figure out how best to make this work for the customer. And little things nutritionally you can shift to have a major impact on that feed cost. And so that when you're in the university, you try to hit everything exactly right. When you get in the feed mill, not everything is exact. And I think that if you can tweak a little bit here and there, you can save $5 pretty easy today, which talk about the egg market. I mean, with the egg market being where it is, $5 pays a lot. So it makes a big difference today versus what it was, say, a year ago when our egg markets were really high. So yeah, that's probably the biggest things I noticed. And just the politics and everything. Politics in university is way different than politics in an industry. Way different. And probably the speed of which things are done as well. University takes their time. Sometimes I felt like I wasted a lot of my time just sitting in meetings, committee meetings. If I'm in a meeting in the industry or where I work today, if I don't have some kind of action plans within 30 minutes, then I'm wasting everybody's time and ultimately the producers. So it's just a different pace. I like that pace, but I do like the ability to give back to the customers better this way. I can have some direct impact on what they do and how they live. And if I can make them successful by doing what I do, that's great.
So, which one of those positions, or maybe both, have prepared you for the conversations that you're having today with the producers?
I think on the academic side, I would say that it gave me an understanding of different products and different efficiencies on things that actually do work. When you're running research for 7 years there, and 6, 7 years at the university, you kind of get a feel for what things work, what things don't, how you need to work with certain things, and it gives you a lot more confidence that what you do in the field when you get out to the industry. Okay, this thing's going to work. It's going to save you $5-8. I believe in it because I tested it. It gave me that backing, that understanding of different feed additives at that point that could come back and actually impact that producer. I think too that the cost of everything. I mean, just knowing the differences in some of these ingredient costs and the values that it brings, over time. As a nutritionist, you figure out in your head pretty quick on what things can work and what things won't. And I tell my new nutritionists, it's kind of a gut thing. It sounds bad. It's not scientific, but it's where you think things need to go. And if you do this for 25, 30 years, you kind of just have a feel for, hey, this is what we need to do. Bring this ingredient in. We'll do the final diets, but it's going to save you this much money. So it's real time. It's real quick. You don't really have a lot of time to do these things over, if you have to take a month to get it done, your producer would be out of business. They're going to lose a lot of money. So how do we maximize that time and that understanding of all these ingredients and diets, and how can we make it best work? And I probably learned that mostly at Purina when I was there, just understanding, working with all the different producers. I might have had 100 some producers I worked with back in the day when I first started. And so those economic times, as we were talking about a little bit ago, just about the cyclic nature of the layer industry. Everything goes up and down. So you got to be ready for that time where it is tough, like right now. I mean, you got to be ready for it. What do we do? What do we put in place to make sure that producer makes it through to the long haul? So I think both of those things really trained me in a way to be prepared for some of these things. And it's just repetition. It's just don't get stressed about it. It is what it is. Work out the problem. What is the problem you got to try to solve and put it together and move it forward with confidence. So that's probably what I've learned over the last 25 years. I'm aging myself, but it's all those pieces. And anybody you talk to, I mean, all those pieces add to what you are at the end and what you learn. That's your skill set, and that just giving that back today is enjoyable for me to help everybody out.
So you mentioned you're aging yourself, but with 25 years of experience in the industry, you've experienced similar times where egg prices were bottoms and input costs were high. So this isn't your first rodeo in this.
No, not the first time. Good and bad with it. If you got, depending on what the producer has for markets and how they're marketing their eggs, if they're at a cost plus deal, they're probably doing a little bit better in this thing. If they're out there on the open market, it's not very good at all. But they probably made a lot of money when the egg market was really good, so depending on the customer, it makes a difference on what you need to try to achieve when you're doing nutrition or adding additives or how you're trying to help them, because one group of producers are going to be doing okay, not great, but they're not just losing money like crazy. The other one is having a tough time right now and, making decisions on, what percentage of my birds do I just remove right now because I can save more money by not having those birds and not feeding them, especially with the way, feed prices are right now, which is counterproductive what a typical producer or farmer wants to think like, but tough times, you have to have tough reactions to things and new plans. And I think that's what people are struggling with right now. Do I leave my operation half full? Which seems crazy, but if you're not losing that money, then you're probably better off long term.
It is tough when you're having to make long-term decisions. And a year ago, the decision was, how do I find more birds? And how do I react to avian influenza? And how do I, capture the $8 market? And now it's, how do I cull birds so that way I'm not losing money on every dozen that I'm selling?
Yep. Yeah, it's totally different process. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but that we were in a different situation. And I think whether their markets are in the organic division or commercial egg, what have you, everybody's getting hurt the same. So everybody's having these decisions. And with the laying end industry, it's not like you can just get new pullets tomorrow either. That's a long term process, and there's planning sometimes out 2 years out there on pullets. You can't just go grab some more. So to make a decision to get rid of 500,000 birds there, that's not taken lightly, and you got to make sure you got some backup plan on that, eventually, so that when this egg market turns around, which it will eventually, you have birds in there to make some money now. So it's a gamble. It is. I mean, but you got to make those decisions.
So let's put ourselves on the farm. We're the farm manager and we're being asked to make those tough decisions on cutting feed cost. I've not been on the farm in that position. Help walk through the decision-making processes that you've been part of or you would recommend from your perspective and your experience.
Yeah, it's a tough, because when we go out there to set up diets for it as a nutritionist, we're trying to optimize production. We're trying to get as many eggs out of those birds as you can. Now, sometimes, nutritionists are a little bit different, but they may shy on the conservative side on certain things like amino acids or enzymes, those types of things, which are pretty prevalent today. I think we need to ratchet that back. You got to look at your highest priced ingredients or nutrients even. Protein and fat and energy, your two probably highest input costs, just because of the makeup of the diet. So if you can look at those nutrients, try to reduce some cost on the feed side, I think that's the first thing you need to start to look at. Because there's always other things out there. You're looking at the nutrients for certain production, but then you also have additives that might be helping with, say, E. coli or salmonella or Clostridia, even cocci. So you got to balance that out so that you don't just create a train wreck. You need to maintain your eggs. You got to maintain your case weights if you keep those hens around. So the first thing would be nutrients. Get those back in line where you probably need to be. That's not necessarily crashing the birds, but maybe not optimal, which sounds bad. I'm saying this to the nutrition. I'm not trying to optimize. I'm trying to survive, So that you go into survival mode. Then I would look at those ingredients. Is it the pre and probiotics, the, different additives we use to help with health? Are they all important? I think when you're doing that and you got a good egg market, you can be proactive. You can put in stuff in there that, okay, we typically have E. coli, peritonitis in later birds, those kind of things. We're looking at optimizing shells, after 40 weeks of age. Do we really need those right now? And I'm selling additives. I'm saying that, hey, let's start to look at these things because I think we need to evaluate what's really important right now, just to make through and to make sure this producer is here in 6 months from now versus, I can survive somewhat out there with the breadth of sales that I have, but this one producer may not because I'm adding X number of dollars with additives from different companies. So I think you really got to look at that too. What is the most important thing that you need to do to optimize health, but give them enough nutrients? They keep laying eggs and to keep in the ballpark as far as what the market needs, but you're not throwing a bunch of money out the door. So anything you can do there on those two levels, I think we need to be doing now, in addition to looking at just removing a flock. I mean, that's the other thing. I think that's the hardest thing I think out of this. I mean, I can do a lot of things on the diets and reduce diet costs, but easily right now by, $10, $20 or more, just to make some slight changes. I mean, I think we can still keep these birds moving forward. But those two things are probably the biggest things we need to be evaluating as a nutritionist right now. Make sure these producers get through this cycle that we're in right now.
And if you had to talk about if you had 10 flocks in front of you, which flock would you consider saying, okay, this is where I might put priorities around depop for, a certain type of bird, a certain type of age, things like that?
I'd probably, right now I'd probably start with my worst producing oldest flock, probably get those out. Even if they're at 65 weeks, which used to be the time we used to molt back in the day. If they're 65 weeks and they're down there below, 90% right now. I think you need to be looking at those. If you got something that's less than that, you're just feeding a bunch of high price feed to them, and you're not getting your eggs out of them, and you're not paying for that at all. So I would start at that level, just to start to move them off earlier than you normally do. I mean, a lot of these flocks are going out on normal cycle at 90 to 100 weeks of age. So if you can start to pull those off a little bit earlier, you're saving some of that income or that cost across your whole system. You got to be thinking about the whole system. Where do I need to get back down? What do I have for bullets coming in? That's a part of this too. And but I would start pulling out some blocks earlier than what you normally do. And actually, some of those that are close, maybe they're 4 weeks, 6 weeks out from going out anyway on your normal cycle. Put them back to a diet that's just going to maintain eggs. Get them out of there, keep them alive, keep them moving, keep them producing, and pull them out early. That's going to optimize your at least maintain some type of level of income, and keep the other ones in to keep your markets happy. We still got to produce eggs, but not at the expense of going out of business because you're losing so much. So I would start there. I'd start at the older flocks, those ones that are getting close to going out, pull that back, use that as some downtime. Doesn't hurt to do that and do everything better. Everybody always gets strapped, and you got an operation of 1 million birds, 2 million birds, 7 million birds on a site. You're always stretching everybody all the time. So, okay, you pull those people off, you put it into your rest of your system. You can optimize your system a lot better, make sure you get everything done right for sure too. There might be some layoffs too. That's part of it too. But that's where I would start at least. And then definitely do your nutrition adjustments, which we should be doing today to get us through this.
So as we talk about managing these birds, you mentioned something in our pre-conversation that said you can't feed yourself out of poor management. What do you mean by that?
There's if a producer's not doing what they're doing on the farm, whether they've got wet litter conditions in a cage-free house, if they're not maintaining their feed like they're supposed to. I've seen places where people are actually only feeding twice to limit feed in a bird, and they're out of feed by the time they get to 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They don't feed anymore. Some of those things you can't outfeed that. There's just no way. We tried. My best flocks out there is when everything works perfect, which doesn't happen too often, obviously. But when they do, these birds will do awesome. These birds can do what they need to do. They're bred the way they're supposed to be, producing eggs to meat. They'll do awesome. Then you can actually optimize the nutrition and you can get them to smoke. But if you don't manage those birds right, if you're not managing your ventilation correct, you got temperatures are too high or too cold, feed's not getting in front of the birds, your water lines are clogged. I can't do anything on the nutrition to save that. There's just nothing I can do. You're always going to have that variability within that flock, and you got too high of you got wet litter conditions, you probably got a higher microbial level in the barn, which is going to cause issues with enteritis and E. coli and different things like that. And I just can't feed past that. Even if you're using some of these additives that we have today, those are more of a proactive approach. They're not a treatment. And we don't want to go back into the antibiotic realm as much, anymore either. We're going away from that. So management today is probably the most important thing right now that I would say, outside of making sure you got the right nutrition in front of them, is to make sure you're managing the birds right. Because I can't feed them enough. I can't feed them the right nutrients, high levels of nutrients to get past that. Diseases have issues too. You got MG in your flock, you got LT, coryza. The level of nutrition is probably to get them through that. It is what it is.
So as you work with these farmers and as you're talking with them and you're working with your team, you have a great team. What's something you're focusing on right now that helps with even the product selection of what they're doing that will help pay off in the end? Where are you focused on for that right now?
As far as feed additives, I would say that, we're trying to, some of the outside of like the prebiotics, the health type products, I would say we're trying to optimize things such as amino acids, those types of things, to make sure we're feeding on a amino acid basis versus the total protein basis, just to optimize cost. But yet get the information, get the nutrients to the birds. I think that on the additive side, depending on the cost of everything, I would say you still got to focus on what their challenge is. Outside of just cost, what other issues do they have? Do they have an E. coli issue? If they do, then okay, they're losing more birds. And we probably should be looking at something to help with E. coli, whether it's a vaccination or if it's a pre or probiotic. Those types of things out there, those have value, and I think those things have a place where they're fairly cheap and economical. They're not crazy priced, like they used to be in the past. So I think there's something that can still be beneficial if you get more eggs and you get better livability out of those birds to continue with them. The more eggs you get, even in a bit down market, you still do better. So if you can do that at a cheaper price, I think that my group needs to be looking at that for sure. And that helps. That just helps with the overall system. And when they come up with their next flock, they're going to be more in tune to be ready to roll and have a clean flock, a clean environment going in with new pullets too. So those are the things I'm looking at, on a core basis, just on general ingredients for the diets, on cost, but then also looking at, okay, exactly what do they need? What do they need for maintaining the flock's health? If it's E. coli, I got a certain program for that that's probably economical that'll get them more eggs. And then we always got to look it back. We talked about the economics originally. I mean, we got to be looking at bringing in that cost per dozen just to see if that's worthwhile. Even if you got an E. coli issue, if it's not going to move the needle on egg production or improve the livability by X, and it still doesn't pay off, then say pull it out. It doesn't. I'm sure that people at Alltech probably wouldn't like me saying that, but at the end of the day, if I can keep the producer in the business and moving forward, even if I lose some business, over the 6 month period, I still got that customer. I can still move him into an economically viable situation, and I can, sell my products. I can sell other people's products, to bring him back in. So the biggest thing is keep that producer running, because the producer's gone, then you got nothing at the end of the day. So I'd rather shy on the side of my side and help that producer than have them gone.
Well, that's just good business. As I think about being an allied member of this industry, our customers are hurting, but I'm guaranteeing that the allied are also having their own challenges with it, because if our customers are hurting, we're hurting. And we just want them to be in business, because if they're in business in 6 months, then they'll have to fix something, replace something, build something down the road. And just being a good partner through this means, and it's the long term. I mean, we all have to ride the same roller coaster together.
Yeah, it's not a short-term game. It's a long-term game, and you got, I mean, like I said, everybody's getting beat up right now because of this egg market and changes and all that kind of stuff. But we're all going through the cycle. We'll come through the cycle on the other side. It's just playing it right and being humane in my mind too, and understanding everybody's in this thing together. Not one group versus another one really right now.
No, not at all. So I want to take a moment. I'm going to take just a little bit of break here to talk about Prism Controls. They are the sponsor of this podcast. And when we talk about feed, we talk about making sure that there's good data to that feed to know where your birds are eating, know where everything's working. And one thing that Prism Controls has found over the years is egg counters. Egg counters, actually, if you have them on the different rows and tiers, you can understand what your birds are doing. If they're not producing eggs because there's a feed trough that's empty, then your egg production in that general area is going to go down. And with conventional, it's pretty easy. You could see it. With cage-free, you're really going to see it with egg counters. So one of the key aspects of Prism Controls is they offer two different types of counters: the IR counters, that tried and true industry standard, and their new egg site cameras that they can count basically on anything. But the accuracy of that data is important, and that's really important to Prism Controls. So thank you for letting me take that break, audience. I have to promote, if you have any questions about egg counting, you have any questions about how we're tracking feed, measuring feed, things like that, please reach out to prismcontrols.com. And you can reach the team there, and they can help you kind of navigate these challenging times. So as I come back,
I'll add to that, Brandon. I think that those things are pretty darn important. I mean, as a nutritionist, I've got to have data to make decisions. And if you don't have the right data, I've got, and they're all good producers, but sometimes the egg counters they have are really old, or they're dirty, they don't manage them right, those types of things. And if I don't know what a house within, say, 15 houses is doing, I've got to look at the whole operation as one. That's not very economical based on different feeding programs and what we're using for feed. And, the more information we have, and I think long term, as we go into the new age with AI and everything and bringing everything together, the more you can bring these different platforms together long term, from the egg counters to the feed to maybe health management, even looking at, God forbid, in the future, we got cameras in the farms, and we're looking at temperatures of birds and just overall flock health. Bringing that into one platform, I think is going to be huge, because then you can make decisions. You can make real-time decisions. And if you don't have that connection with everything and all this data, it's just data. And if you don't use it, you just will not have it, So I think all these data points are great. I use them all the time as a nutritionist coming out and looking at their operation. I can pinpoint a challenge in a house so much quicker than if it's just across the board. So I like that. I love more data I can get, the better off I can support a customer. So I think those are awesome if they're working right.
Well, thank you for that support and just the technology that's out there, whether it's our controller or even the competition's controller. Just being able to count eggs is so much more important, because ultimately that's the product that's going out the door anyways, and that's the result of all the nutrition work that you and your team's trying to help the farmer with.
Yeah, exactly.
So, speaking of technology, you're coming from a PhD background, you're coming from a great company in Alltech. Talk about one technology thing or one thing that you just wish that producers understood a little bit better.
I guess going back to, it takes a lot of time and effort to get to where we are, to where you have a product that we feel like really works. I mean, because I was a nutritionist, just I did nutrition for everybody. So I worked with all the different allied groups, back in the day at Period. So I was the one that had to go through and figure out what products to use. And our products we've got, at one time we were probably one of the pioneers on the yeast area. Today there's a lot of competition out there. There might be 20 different companies out there providing the same thing. How do you make a determination on how that works? I think the biggest thing is that, when we go to put together a product, it's not just, okay, let's put it together and throw it out the door. Days are gone of that approach, because I think there's too much risk. Nobody wants that kind of risk. So one thing that we do a lot at Alltech, and I know other companies do, but I'll take my time to tell Alltech a little bit. We go through and do our due diligence on really what the customers need. What are the challenges the customers have? So instead of, in the past, I think that a lot of companies went from the top down. They developed these things up on the whiteboards, and not to say they were bad products, but it doesn't fit what the needs are for the customer. So when we're out here trying to work on this, we're looking at, we call it jobs to be done, but it's what are the main things that are really ailing the industry, whether it's Clostridia, if it's Cocci, is avian influenza is always on somebody's list. Shell quality, pullet livability is a challenge on the breeder side. So what are those things that are really ailing in the customer? So we look at that first, and okay, do we have anything that could help the industry with that? If not, could we put something together? We work a lot with other companies outside of just our own, although I think we produce probably 85, 90% of our own products, so we've got an opportunity to really fine tune exactly what we need to get out there for the customers. But then, looking at what they need, and then, okay, let's put some stuff together to be able to really conquer that, take care of that E. coli issue. And then it's throwing it out to the research. We got to have some kind of research base on this. Before I launch a product, I'm going to go through my due diligence to make sure that it works. Because if you go out there, you're going to get mud on your face, and the customer's going to lose ultimately if you go out there too quick. So I like to make sure that I shy on the side of caution, probably just because on my science background, I'm probably more methodical on things than somebody else that's just running quick. I like to take my time enough to make sure I feel good about the move, and that we've got some really good sound evidence that, okay, the ROI is going to be in that 3-to-1 or better, that when you go out there with a product, it's going to work. There's always instances, I would say, if you got a product that works 70% of the time, you're doing pretty darn good, because of those differences in management and challenges you run into. So that's the thing that I don't think that, some of the guys out there know, that, we do go through a lot of project management and cost to make sure we're bringing them a sound product. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's a big thing. And then when you're looking across all these different products, they might be somewhat like, but, go back and look at their research. Did they actually do the research they said they did? Did they do their due diligence to really titrate out where this particular molecule should be at to optimize both cost but efficiency in the bird? So that's the process we go through here at Alltech that we're doing. And I think at the end of the day, that's the way you should do it in order to support these customers in the field, is do it right the first time, and make sure the product's going to work, and it gives a return. I don't want to go out there. A lot of times you go out there with a 2-to-1 return, 3-to-1 return, even sometimes there's so much noise in a system, you may not pick it up. So make sure it's sound, make sure it's working right. My team out there, I got a pretty broad spectrum team now, anywhere from probably early 30s to 70. So a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge in a number of different areas, whether it be feed bill management to vaccination to managing birds to veterinary services. And I got a team that, they can pull in different pieces of the team to help a customer. So we might have one of my customers managed by, say, Keith Fleetwood on the East Coast. But he also works with the veterinarian. He works with the other nutritionists on the team to make sure that he brings the needs of the customer in the front, and we bring in the experts to help them. So that's the other thing I think that we do pretty well. That not just bringing sound products to the market to meet the needs of the customer, but also the technical backing to support them on a number of different levels.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier pullets and how the focus on pullets can really affect the long-term success of the layers. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, pullets, we usually have those pullets around for probably 16, 20 weeks before they start laying. And if you don't hit that right, if you don't have the right fat pad on them, the right conditioning, the right body structure in that bird, the right bone development before they start laying, you're going to hurt yourself long term. So we don't really focus on pullets as much as we probably do layers because the layers are around for many, many, many weeks. And that's our money. The pullets are just being raised with really no income. It's just the cost. If you don't get those birds off to the right start, then they're going to hurt you long term. If you have a really, really good pullet coming out, they're uniform, they're 90 plus uniformity, they got good fleshing, they got the right body structure, they're going to do great. And they're going to continue to lay eggs way out there into those 90 week of age structure, which we got today. So, having the right levels of nutrients in those feeds, making sure that we've got birds living all the way there too. Because if you got a disease challenge or a E. coli challenge, that doesn't hurt just one bird; it hurts several. So if we miss on our body weights that we need to have at 6, 8, 12 weeks along the way, you're going to hurt yourself long term. And then when you get ready to come out right before we get to the lay house, we got to make sure we're building that medullary bone in that bird too. So optimizing the nutrition, I would say it also includes organic minerals. At a certain state, there's been enough there. They're a little higher priced, but as far as a bird uniformity and a bird livability, and maintaining good bone structure at the end to get them ready, that works great. So I think if you have a poor flock, you're always going to have a poor flock in the lay house. That's just nothing you can do about it. So you really need to focus there on that 16 weeks of growth on those pullets to make sure that you have a just gangbuster bird when you get them out into the lay house. So you can't mess that up. You got to make sure you really focus on that to make sure it's right in order to have a good leg flock.
And it sounds like that if you cut cost in the pullets, then you're going to spend more anyways on the layer because you're trying to recover whatever you can at that point.
Yeah, you're better off to spend a little bit more money on that. I mean, each one of these birds they're going to eat about 12 pounds per bird, so it's not a huge amount of cost there. If you add a few things here and there to make sure they're livable, they're growing the way they're supposed to. I think birds today they grow a little bit better than they used to. We had some of the original flocks, say 15, 20 years ago, we had some struggles with trying to hit body weights, at 18 weeks, but today it's more achievable. And if you can get that, you got more sellable eggs in the beginning. You got bigger eggs. You got better production that jumps up really quick, and you can get your eggs. Your total eggs per hen house is going to be much, much better if you hit the right numbers on your pullets. So your overall economics are going to be better, even if you spend an extra, 50 cents per bird, you're going to be better off. So we really need to focus there. When I was at the university, we always had to raise the pullets all the way to do any kind of layer nutrition work because we had strict rules on disease control and those types of things. So I always use that as an opportunity to do a trial. I mean, why just raise them? Let's learn something. Let's learn on bone metabolism, calcium metabolism. What makes that bird grow the way they do, and how can we optimize that? So I think we don't do a lot of research in that area. It's not a glamorous. It's not the money side. But I think we should do more. I think we should be working on, especially with birds going in a single cycle all the way out to 90 to 100 weeks. We should be doing more up there to make sure we optimize that. And then we got no problem going all the way to 90 to 100 weeks.
So yeah, if you're growing pullets out there, that's something to think about when your costs are continue to rise. Your return on investment's harder to calculate. What type of pullet are you producing? One that's because there's a lot of growers out there that's all they do is grow pullets.
Yep.
And we're speaking directly to you is, this is your product, and investing in those birds is investing in the future of that layer flock, and that's your return business for your layer customers. So
no, I agree. And right now it's pretty easy just to pull back because the industry's kind of in a rough spot, but they're going to need good pullets coming out to make sure that they hit their marks when this egg market changes. And so to me, it's not time to pull back on that. Maybe pulling back on some of the layer side to stop some bleeding, but not on the pullet side. That isn't where I'd probably pull back.
All right. We're going to circle all the way back to the beginning where, as we wrap this thing up, you're speaking directly to the farm. What's one thing under pressure right now to cut cost? What's the one thing they should not cut? And then where should they look instead?
I mean, I think that don't cut back on your management side. Make sure you still maintain that bird flock, that bird health within those houses. Make sure you keep that going. Don't be pulling back on that. I think the birds you got, you want to get as many eggs as you can out of them. I think that depending on the health and what you're dealing with in certain houses, don't just pull back on a certain product just because you think it's costing them too much. It could be something that's maintaining livability. It's reducing E. coli. Let the birds tell you on a health basis what you should pick and pull out of that feed. I think on the nutrient side, you can make some adjustments. Make some adjustments. You're not going to see a train wreck on your egg production, but I would look at both maintaining make sure you got the best optimized environment you have in that house. Make sure that's right and the birds you got left there. Secondly, make sure you pull out the right products. If there's a product there that's working for a certain reason, leave it in there if that helps pay the bills and it makes sure that you got eggs coming out of that house that's left. Those are probably the two things I'd probably hit is to tell them that, we're in the summertime, so ventilation is a big deal. We don't have to worry about, heating costs or anything like that right now. So that's probably not an issue until we get into winter months. Hopefully our egg market's better by then, but you never know. But right now I would say optimizing that environment in the house is something not to cut. And, look at your feed additives, make some cuts where we think we need to, because there's not an issue right now, but make sure you got the health right. I would say probably the other thing on the additive basis is probably just enzymes. Enzymes should be left in the feeds because if you pull the enzymes out, they're fairly cheap anyway. Even if you've got a carbohydrates, a protease, and a phytase in there, it's probably not costing you much over $1. So leave those in. But the value they bring on uplifting nutrients to where it's a cost savings for you is far outpaying the enzymes. So keep the enzymes in there for sure. That needs to stay because that's a cost savings measure. And then look at your health side of things and see what things really need to be there to maintain the health of the flock for the long haul. And then reduce your nutrients, make some adjustments on your nutrients. That's 70% of your cost is those nutrients. Make some adjustments there so you can make that cost per dozen cheaper.
All right. Any final words to our producers out there today?
Hang in there. I think we're all like we talked about earlier, we're all in there to help everybody. We want to make sure that everybody gets through this whole process. We have to make some pretty tough decisions right now. But there's things that, I was talking to a producer yesterday actually about this whole process. And it's like, we got to make some decisions. I said, you give me some numbers on your economics, I'll help you try to work through this process. Let's make these decisions together so that we can come out of this on the other side. So I think working as a team is probably even more, just don't let everybody's in this together. And I think that we've got to work together as a team right now more than ever, just to make sure we get through this whole downfall.
So producers out there, I give you one piece of advice: call your nutritionist before you make any decisions. Don't try to think that you have to do this alone, because as Curtis talks about, you take away enzymes and now something else goes off. The allied folks that are out there, your nutritionists, your veterinarians, they understand what you're going through, and their job is not going to be to just protect their products. So we all are in this together. If you're having problems with your environment, give Prism Controls a call. Even if it's not our product, we can at least talk you through how to improve your environment and the situation that you're in, because it could be something very simple. And we need you to be there in 6 months, a year, 10 years from now. And if we can help you with your environment, if we can help you with your egg counting, if we can make you more efficient during this time, which means you can get more out of the people that you have working for you, please give us a call. We'd love to be able to talk with you and understand what we can do to help you become more efficient in those ways. So if this is valuable to you, please share it with somebody. This is a topic that I have not seen much being talked about right now, is where to cut cost, but I think it's pretty important. So please, listeners, share this with other producers, other farmers, and also give us your feedback. If this is another topic that, there's another topic that you want to talk about, please share it with me. You can find my information in the links down below, just as well as Curtis's information. So I'm sure he's willing to take your calls and understand what he can do to help you as well. So thank you again, Curtis. And with that, listeners, have a great day.